Yo, what's going on guys, your boy Max here and welcome back to the channel. In this video we'll be talking about how you guys can beat sweats or better plays in Fortnite. And people are getting better and better at this game, so my definition of a sweat right now may be your average player whenever you're watching this. But the great thing about this video is the fact that I've actually tried to put in tips that will be valuable forever and can be applied in any state of the game. So that's why you should definitely watch the video until the very end. And without any further ado, let's begin. So whatever you do when you actually run into a sweat or a player who's better than you, do not try to run or hide. This is something you don't want to be doing because it pretty much exposes the fact that you're not the best at this game and that you're not very confident in your skills, and this is really bad, and you definitely don't want to be doing that because your opponent will feed off of that, and the fact that he's already better than you and that extra confidence boost may sometimes be the separation factor from you winning the fight and from you losing the fight. So do make sure that whatever you do in situations when you actually run into a good player, you do not do one of these two things. Don't run or don't try to hide, because it will only lead to your downfall. Next, let's talk about trying to get a few AR or SMG shots off on your opponent before you actually push them, or before they push you in this case. But this may actually give you the starting advantage in the fight, because you know, when you do get up close and personal with your opponent, they're much more likely to beat you up close, because shotguns are probably like one of the more reliable weapons in Fortnite. And you know, if you challenge your better opponent to the bloom fight, then you have a much higher chance of winning that fight, because you know, the really good players at this game are really good with stuff like shotguns and SMGs up close, and that's why you should maybe sometimes even go for the occasional bloom fight if you know the opponent is better than you, and it will just give you a much higher chance of winning that fight, as I just said. And yeah, it's just generally very important to knock off some damage before you actually start the fight, because it will be very beneficial in the long run of the fight. But anyways, moving on to the next tip, we're going to be talking about practicing box fights to actually get better up close when it does come to it. And you should do box fights with better players too, because the better the player you're fighting against, the more practice you're going to get in that you just would not get if you were fighting somebody, say, of a skill level that is below yours. And you'll definitely know when you're fighting someone better than you in box fights, because they'll be winning nearly every single round, and that's okay. As I've said millions of times before, if you are dying to a player who is better than you 100 times in box fights, that's much more beneficial than just killing a bot 100 times, because the better player will test you more, and it will just generally improve you as a player, not in just box fights, but you know, it will set high expectations for your opponents, which is very important. You never just want to take your opponents for bots, especially in this case. If the player is better than you, then you just absolutely need to, you know, set your expectations high for the fight, because you know, the high skilled players will always try to outsmart you and outplay you in the best possible way they can. Another thing you should be doing when fighting better players is being super aware in fights, and being able to track your opponents as best as you can, because if you lose your opponent, they are much likely to heal up. Let's say, even if you do get some shots off on them, they'll be able to get that health back. And also, if you don't track your opponent, they will just move super unpredictably, and you'll have a much higher chance of just dying to them. And it's not the easiest thing to be able to track your opponent in fights, because you know, the audio queue in this game is just quite bad, if I say so myself. But try and get your eyes on them whenever you can, even through, you know, your edits and stuff. Maybe do the pyramid peak, which a lot of people do in comp nowadays, and you know, that will just help you maybe locate your opponent whenever you do lose them. Next, we're going to be talking about optimizing your gaming equipment. So, say if you're on a controller and you run into a player who's better than you, and you can pretty much recognize that they are on keyboard. Then you should just abuse your aim assist, and that's kind of your wild card here, because um, like the keyboard player will very rarely be able to counter the controller player in that situation if you know that they are on keyboard, because you can just jump into their box, because the likelihood is your box fighting skills will probably be better, because you can just use your mythic drum gun or SMG, because the SMGs just have super crazy aim assist, and especially if you play on linear, you'll be able to just track your opponents so well with your guns, and just try and take the fight up close if you can recognize that your opponent is on keyboard, say for example. And this can also be applied to keyboard and mouse. If you use keyboard and mouse, then you'll likely be better at something like exploiting your opponents with edits and maybe quick builds. So obviously, you should be expanding out, from just sitting in a 1 by 1 maybe into like a 3 or 4 by 1 to get away from your opponent to heal, say for example, and maybe take height whenever you can, because controller players are of course just naturally going to be slower at building because of the way things are. And yeah, just make sure that you're always optimizing your gaming equipment in situations, and this is something I rarely ever see being talked about, and it's quite an underrated tip, honestly, if I do say so myself. But the final thing that we're going to be talking about today is applying pressure to your opponent whenever you get them low. And this will pretty much help you dictate the fight, because if you get your opponent low and they are better than you, then the likelihood is they're going to try get away and heal up, because they don't want to die to you, who is of a lower skill level. And it's just super important that once you do get your opponent low, you don't give them a single chance to get away, because that will probably be your only chance to secure the kill. And yeah, that's just something you want to be doing. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up, and I do hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and I hope it was helpful. And if that is the case, and then make sure to leave a like, a rating on the video, and leave a comment down below with any video suggestions for the future. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel with notifications on to never miss another upload from your boy ever again. And make sure to use the code MaxGamer7 in the Fortnite item store if you would like to help support the channel even further. But I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.